Hello, everyone. Welcome to the League of Women Voters Pros and Cons tonight. Just quickly, my name is Lori. I am here with Sheila. We are with the League of Women Voters of San Diego. And just a little bit about the League. Our organization has been around for over 100 years. The National League was founded in 1920 along with the ratification of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. Our particular chapter here at this league in San Diego has been around for about 36 years. So one of our principal missions, as you all know, is to empower voters, and we do that through legislation and advocacy, and also through events like this, where we spend some time in communities and do outreach for individuals to help them understand what's on their ballot. So tonight we're going to be doing that with you. We're going to go through the ballot measures and propositions, and we'd ask for you to hold your questions until the end so that we can go through them all. Our goal is to answer questions, give you enough of information as we go so that you don't have a lot of burning questions during this prop talk, and you can just save them at the end. Just write them down and we'll collect them and answer them at the end. In the meantime, though, I'd like to invite you to take a look at some of the resources we provide for you on our website. So if you go to our website, it's lwvsandiego.org, you will see a drop-down menu right in the very center that has this information on it. And if you click it, you can go to the very first drop-down menu and click that, and that will take you to an entire page of information and resources that you can click on, download, review, take a look at, etc. And in fact, the item in the center, the QR code in the center, if you want to scan it right now, that will give you access to this entire slideshow, which we host on our website. So everything you're going to see here tonight, you can also see later. So don't feel like you have to worry about what we talk about or go through here today, because you'll have access to it later. So tonight we're going to take you through the ballot measures and propositions, and we're going to answer some questions as we go. You'll notice a pattern as we continue. We have a series of slides that walk you through these questions, and we'll talk about things like how did it get on your ballot, who put it there, how can we vote it into or out of legislation, like what is the majority voters required to put this into legislation, who supports and opposes it, and the last bullet, but not the least, who is paying for it. That's very interesting. Every election season is interesting, but this year in particular. So just so you know, our organization is a nonpartisan political organization. And by that I mean we do not support or oppose candidates or parties. We have a long history of being neutral in terms of candidates and parties, but we're very politically active. And one of the things that we're doing tonight is just giving you the information you need to understand what's on your ballot. So the views and the information expressed here tonight by Sheila and me, they're not the views of the League. They're the information that we've gathered from the resources that we've referenced that give you an accurate information regarding these ballot measures and propositions. So the state propositions are proposed laws that come to us by two methods. It's either brought to us via ballot by citizens initiative or legislative referral, and they either make laws, or change California's constitution. And so we're going to be talking about all of those today, and I believe all of them require a simple majority to pass, and you'll see that on every slide as we go through. So this is the list of propositions that we're going to review tonight. We're also going to do local ballot measures. So the County of San Diego and the City of San Diego have some measures that we're going to review for you tonight as well. But this is what we're going to get started with. It's the state propositions. You can get a sense of what they cover by looking at this list. And the first one, Proposition 2, is a school bond. And I'm going to turn it over to Sheila and let her talk to you a little bit about what a bond is and then discuss this particular proposition.
Okay, so what you're going to see is Lori and I will be switching off, so you don't get bored with either one of us as we go through this. So when we have state propositions, there's two of them. Both of them I'll be talking about are going to be bonds. So we wanted to do a little bit about what a bond is. And it's really a way for governments to borrow money, generally, usually, not required, but usually it's for capital improvements. So if you think about it, if you have a mortgage, similar to a bond, somebody gives you money and then you have to pay them back. So on our bonds, what you're going to see is basically it's approval for the state to sell a bond for a specific purpose. Okay. California Constitution requires that bonds must be approved by three things. Both of our state houses, so they first have to approve that they think we should issue a bond, and they have to approve it by 2/3. Then it comes to the people, and we have to approve it by just a majority, so 50% plus one vote. Okay? So that was the overview of bonds. So Prop 2. What Proposition 2, the question that they're asking us is, should the state authorize $10 billion in bonds to build new or renovate existing public schools and community college facilities? Okay, that's what we're being asked here. So a little bit of the situation. California has about 10,000 public schools and 115 community colleges. Some are older, some need new facilities, upgrades of facilities. So what this bond would do, little trivia here. Unlike many other states, California does not pay for school repairs through permanent funding system, so through our regular budget. So any repairs or upgrades go through state and local bonds. Okay. So that's a little bit different there. So what it would do is it would, this gives the approval to issue $10 billion in bonds to fund construction and modernization of our public K through 12 and community colleges. Looking at this, I cannot be tethered to this. It's going to drive you crazy. So, as you see here, new construction of K through 12 facilities is about 40% of it. So that's new facilities. If you add to that the modernization or upgrade, you're getting another 30%. So about 70% of this is going to be through our K through 12. And then we have community colleges, some charter school facilities, and some technical. But most of it is for our K through 12. One of the things this does is that it changes the fund formulation. So in many cases, the state has money and then local. So you know when we have things that say, do you want to fund the San Diego Unified School District, a bond there, it's getting matched by funds from the state. What they're doing is they're changing the equation such that those districts that are in lower economic areas have less that they have to do to get more money. Okay? So wealthier school districts, it'll still be the same, but here it's that. Okay? And then you'll see this is big on quite a few of our bond and our tax measures. That what it's doing is it includes much more stringent accountability. Okay? So if we approve this and they issue the bonds, it will add half $500 million a year, or $500 million, for 35 years. So they're looking for a 35-year term. This is the group of people that support it. They've raised $2.2 million. What's interesting on the $2.2 million is $1 million of that is from the California building industry. Another $1 million is from a variety of engineering, construction, and architecture firms. Okay, so the people supporting this are the people that are probably going to get paid to actually do this work. Their arguments are, we've got outdated facilities, we need to repair those, we need to upgrade to basic standards, to increase access to affordable college education through our community college system, that it does have the taxpayer accountability, and it protects local control. So again, this is the local school districts have to raise some money, and then the state. So the local districts are the ones really figuring out what is needed. People opposed to it, Harvard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, you'll see them, they're normally opposed to pretty much any new taxes. And then one of the state legislatures, and their arguments are we already have over $109 billion in outstanding and unissued bonds. Politicians overspend. They're asking taxpayers to approve things that should be in the general budget. Okay. Going to my notes, because I got asked this, the California state budget is $310 billion. That's their annual budget. Okay, $225 billion of that is the general fund. So just to give you a sense of what they're asking here, $10 billion of bonds, a $310 billion budget. Okay, so yes means, yep, go ahead and borrow the money. No means don't borrow the money. Figure out either don't do it or find another way to pay for it. Okay.
So I'm going to talk to you about Proposition 3. The question here is, should the California Constitution be amended to define marriage as a fundamental right for all, regardless of sex or race, and remove language that states that marriage is only between a man and a woman? Now, you might be wondering why a state like California would have in its constitution a definition of marriage as only between a man and a woman. And if you were wondering that, it's because you don't remember 2008's Proposition 8. That was a piece of legislation that was put forth to include in our California Constitution language that defined marriage as only existing between a man and a woman. So, 2008's Prop 8 at the time broke the record for the most money that funded pro and con, so support and opposition of any proposition in the country by out-of-state funds. Every state in the country provided money either in support of or in opposition to Prop 8. So that was a major battle here in California, and the Prop 8 won. So the Prop 8 is the language, it created the language that says in our Constitution that defined marriage as only existing legally between a man and a woman. Ironically, it was already unconstitutional within a couple of years. So as you know, the federal government has changed the definition of marriage to include same-sex marriage. It doesn't have to necessarily include only man and a woman. So the whole purpose of this proposition is to merely update our Constitution so that it falls in line with the state, with the federal Constitution and the legality of marriage. So in terms of the fiscal bottom line, you'll notice every slide, every proposition, and we'll give you information around the Legislative Analyst's Office analysis of the financial implications of all of these measures and propositions. And in this one, we just couldn't find any. This doesn't really have any financial implications necessarily associated with it. It's really just updating the language of our Constitution so that we're aligned with the federal government. In support of this is a whole host of individuals, and they've raised $2 million to help its passage. And of course, as I said, their arguments are that it aligns with the Constitution, with the federal Constitution, and it doesn't change any existing laws. It's just a way to kind of clean up our act here. These are the people in opposition to it. They haven't raised any funds in terms of creating any kind of dynamic around opposing it, but they do have opposition to it, and this is some of the opposition that they state in terms of why they do oppose it. So that's Prop 3. If you vote yes, it means yes, I think you should change the Constitution to update it to match who can marry. And then if you vote no, it means you want to keep the Constitution language as it is. So that's Prop 3.
Okay, Prop 4, this is another bond. And so here it's, should the voters let the state sell 10 billion, so another 10 billion bonds, for various projects to reduce climate risks and impacts. Situation, we've had a lot of forest fires, wildfires, droughts, floods becoming more and more common in California. Climate change is impacting farming, water quality, and wildlife. Many people don't have access to safe drinking water on a continual basis. And then between 93 and 2024, California voters decided on 6 bond measures related to parks and the environment, 4 of which were approved, 2 were defeated. So what this allows us to do is to sell bonds for $10 billion, and this is the breakdown of what it would be. So the drought and flood and water supply one, the 3.8 there, half this money is used for activities to increase the amount and quality of water available for people. Okay? Storing water so it can be used during future droughts, as well as cleaning polluted water to make it safe to drink. Forest health and wildfire prevention, that one, all of this money would support activities to improve the health of our forests, try and minimize wildfires. Sea level rise in coastal areas, this would pay for activities to restore coastal areas and protect them from the effects of rising sea level. Also included in this is restoring wetlands. The next one, land conservation and habitat restoration, that's used to protect and restore land for the benefit of fish and wildlife. Energy infrastructure, this is to support the development of wind turbines. Half of it's for that. The remaining money is building infrastructure such as transmission lines to carry electricity longer distances. There's one in there that's for extreme heat. That would pay for activities to protect communities from extreme heat, including adding trees and green spaces. In many areas, many of our cities, there's nothing that provides shade. It also requires in this bond that 40% of the bond revenue is used to fund activities that benefit communities with lower income. Okay. So fiscal bottom line, once again, when we're doing bonds, the payment of this would be $400 million each year for 40 years. Okay, so that's the big one. Now, one of the other potentials is that it would reduce local cost to do these things because now the state's paying for it. And the third one is there's a potential savings because a lot of this is in here to prevent future disasters. So if you don't have the disaster, you don't have the funds to fix that or to deal with it. Support, this is the group here. They've raised $2.9 million. Most of this money has come from the Nature Conservancy and from the California Council of Land Trusts Action Fund. What they're saying is growing threats, wildfires, water pollution, extreme heat. We invest now, get in front of it so that the impact is reduced. That we're already paying a price by failing to do this, by just reacting to the disasters as they come. And it's making sensible investments for the future. Opposition, my couple of legislatures, and then Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And they're saying it should be funded within the state budget. It's a big one, and provides funds for unproven technology and lacks fiscal accountability. That's what they're saying. So for Prop 4, if you vote yes, you're saying go ahead and let's issue those bonds, take on that debt to deal with, get in front of some of the climate change. A no says no, either don't do it or you need to find a different source of funds. Okay. So Lori will take you through Prop 5.
So Prop 5 looks like a bond, but it's not really a bond. There's a lot of financial implications of our ballot this election season. So Sheila's already taken you through multiple bond measures, and when we go to the local measures, you'll see some sales tax and other issues we also have to grapple with and think about. This proposition, it asks if we should lower the voting threshold for local bond measures. So it has to do with bonds, but it's not a bond itself. So currently, and by the way, it's a constitutional amendment that the legislature put forward to us. So it requires a simple majority to pass it, to amend the Constitution. Currently, this constitutional amendment would lower the supermajority vote requirement from 2/3, which is what we currently require of voters, to 55% for local jurisdictions, and to issue bonds. So, as Sheila was saying, municipalities can issue bonds to help raise money to do capital improvements and other things. And right now, if you want to do it locally, the threshold for voters is relatively high. So 2/3 of the voters have to approve it to pass it. This proposition is suggesting that we lower it to a majority, so 55%. So the Legislative Analyst Office has reviewed this proposition, and even though it's difficult to understand exactly what the financial impact will be, the suspicion is that if this does pass, it will enable increased local borrowing. So if our threshold in San Diego passed to 55% versus 2/3 to pass a bond, it would make sense to imagine that we could probably pass more bonds and increase our bond usage. So the LAO is suggesting that it would increase the local borrowing. It would also increase local funding for housing assistance and public infrastructure, because if you read closely, you saw that this particular proposition was for affordable housing and public infrastructure. So it's specific to bonds that promote those types of financial expenditures. So we have some supporters. I want you to pay attention to the first one, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. In a lot of these, you'll begin to notice that some entities and people show up again and again. Sheila's already mentioned Howard Jarvis. You'll see him multiple times on here in his Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. You'll notice AIDS Healthcare Foundation on this particular proposition. That entity will also show up on a couple of others, and those are the juicy ones. So stick with me. And then a host of other people and entities that support this, along with, you'll see on the second column, the League of Women Voters of California. So our organization, our state entity, is a signer of this argument and is a supporter of it. And the people who are supporting it have raised around $5 million in its support. And it says that Prop 5 gives local voters more autonomy. This is, of course, why the League of Women Voters weighed in on this, because it's essentially, even though it's about bonds, it's about voting and opportunities to vote and how voting is handled in municipalities. So here are some of the other supporting comments about this particular one. And as always, people are in opposition as well. These are people who have stated publicly their opposition to it, and the amount raised is zero. You don't always have to raise money to oppose a proposition, obviously. But they do have arguments, and the opponents say that it was written by politicians to push the cost of infrastructure improvements, capital improvements, down to municipalities instead of keeping them at the state. It says it removes protections, and that Californians already struggle with high cost of living, and passing this would increase voters voting in bond measures locally. So just to wrap up here, if you vote yes, it means that you do think that certain local bonds, again, affordable housing and public utilities and infrastructure, should be approved with a lower threshold. So from 66% or 2/3 to 55%. And then if you vote no, you're essentially just saying the law stays as it is.
Okay, Prop 6. It's not a bond. Yay. Eliminates constitutional provisions allowing involuntary servitude for incarcerated persons. So really the question we're being asked is, should the California Constitution, let's put it in the Constitution, remove the provision that allows for involuntary servitude, which is a nice way of saying slavery, to be used as punishment for a crime, prohibits incarcerated people from being punished if they refuse a work assignment, and it would allow incarcerated people to voluntarily accept work assignments in exchange for credit to reduce their sentences. Okay, that's what this one is. California's Constitution mirrors the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which does allow for involuntary servitude as punishment for crimes. No courts will say that you have to work off your sentence. Okay, so that's never, a sentence is a time, not what you do. But it's standard practice that you're in prison and we need you to make license plates or fight wildfires, for example, are the two big ones that I know of. Okay. California is among only 16 states that have an exception clause for this in their constitution. Most recently, voters in Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont removed involuntary servitude language from their state constitutions. Okay. So, prohibit jails and prisons from imposing crime. It would say, so it would be an option, but you can say no and that there's no retribution. That's the second piece. And the third piece is, hey, they could start to say, if you do this work, we could reduce your sentence. So, fiscal bottom line, there's a potential increase or decrease in costs. A lot of this is around how people who work now, because they're not forced to work, how they would get paid and compensated. And if it was a less desirable thing, the prison might actually have to pay more or reduce sentences more. Okay. Signers, quite a big group. No one group has put the majority of the money towards it. They're saying it's an extension of slavery. There's no reason that we should have slavery in a constitution, that it reflects the values of the state in 2024. Major argument. It also prioritizes rehabilitation, and it allows them to choose their work assignments. Okay. This one, the legislature put it on the ballot because we're changing the Constitution. So anytime you add, take away, or amend the Constitution, it requires all of us voting. But it got put on by bipartisan support. There's no opposition groups on this, and there are no opposition arguments. So, a yes says we would change the Constitution saying that involuntary servitude is not allowed. If you vote no, it would stay the way it is right now. Okay? So we're getting into the fun ones.
Okay, this is Prop 32, and it's merely asking, should California raise its statewide minimum wage to $18 an hour by January 1st, 2026, and then each year based on inflation? So just a little bit of context. Currently, the state of California's minimum wage is $16 an hour. But right now, there are about 40 municipalities, including San Diego, that actually have a higher minimum wage than the state's mandated $16 an hour minimum wage. In San Diego, it's $16.85, for example. And other places, like I said, there are 39 other municipalities that also exceed the state minimum wage. So this proposition is a citizen's initiative, and it requires a simple majority to pass. And it's very simple in terms of like the discussion and thought processes around it. So it would just merely raise the minimum wage to $18 an hour by January 1st of 2026. This does have a fiscal bottom line associated with it, but again, the LAO often has to just suggest and imagine what it would do. And so the economic effects of higher wages, sometimes it could produce lower revenues by companies and corporations in San Diego that had to pay those higher wages. So the LAO suggests that perhaps this decrease might result in fewer tax dollars Or they say having people earn a higher wage might get some of these individuals off California's SNAP programs or other programs that support people who are low income, and that would actually improve California's finances. So you can see that it's kind of a seesaw. The LAO doesn't really know exactly what the fiscal impact is going to be. They just suggest ways that it might impact the overall finances of California. So there are several individuals and entities in support of this, and they've raised about $10 million, and these are the individuals and entities supporting. And this is what they say. They say it'll improve the standard of living, it'll improve the economy by making it so that people can, earn more and spend more, and it will alleviate taxpayer burden. So currently taxpayers subsidize some of the individuals whose wages are so low that they require assistance, public assistance. There are, as opposition to this as well, entities that you might imagine would be anti an increased wage. So the Chamber of Commerce is an obvious one, and others as well. They've spent around $65,000 in opposition, and here are some of their suggestions of why they oppose it. So they think that requiring businesses to increase their minimum wage is going to hurt businesses and their ability to thrive here in California, and they suggest that those businesses will have to pass on those costs to consumers, and perhaps will even cause job loss, and it will result in fewer government services. So to recap, if you vote yes on 32, it's stating that you do want the minimum wage to be increased from a state mandated $16 to $18 per hour by 2026, and a no vote means that it would stay the same, stay as it is. All right, these are the good ones coming up next.
Okay. If your mailbox looks like me, you've gotten some stuff on this one. So Prop 33. Question we're asking here is, should the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995 be repealed so local governments could, if they choose, regulate rents? That's what this is. This is not the first time this proposition has been placed on the ballot to repeal the Costa-Hawkins. Two similar initiatives sponsored by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation appeared on the ballot in 2018 and 2020. Okay, both were defeated. So, situation, housing in California is expensive. Renters pay approximately 50% more for housing than in other states. In some areas, rentals are more than double the national average. Some cities already have rent control laws, such as Los Angeles, Santa Monica, San Francisco, San Jose. Okay? About a quarter of Californians are covered by a rent control law. Okay? State law, there's a state law that limits most landlords from raising rent by more than 5% plus inflation each year. Okay, so there is kind of a higher limit there. This law is in effect until 2030. The other state law, called the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, it restricts rent control in three ways. First one, it does not allow rent control on single-family housing. So you can't rent control a house, but you can rent control multifamily housing. It does not allow rent control on any house built after February 1st, 1995, which I'm sure was a good idea in 1995 when they did it, but now that means anything that's 30 years old, no rent control. Okay? And it doesn't let local laws control the rent a landlord can charge a new tenant. Rent control can only limit rent increases on existing tenants. Okay, that's what Costa-Hawkins is. That's what this is saying is asking to repeal. Okay. So repealing the act would allow cities and counties to limit the rent on any housing and limit the rent for first-time tenants. So get rid of this. Now all of a sudden a city council or a legal entity could do that. Okay. So fiscal bottom line, reduction in local property tax revenues. They think tens millions of dollars annually due to likely expansion of rent control in some communities. This one you have to kind of connect the dots because you're like, but they're not paying. The idea is that if you have rent control, now all of a sudden rental properties are worth less, that they would be valued less. Okay, so that's how that one is. And then increased local government costs as a government says, yes, we're going to institute rent control. Now all of a sudden you have to put in the bureaucracy, in a good way, but bureaucracy to actually monitor it. Okay. So support. Variety of people supporting. Notice our friends, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is in there. They've raised $15 million to support this. That entire 15.4 million of the 15.5 was raised by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And just an aside, if you're wondering, well, that doesn't make sense. It's a healthcare foundation. It is, its breadth, its scope is much bigger, and they do run a variety of apartment buildings to put people who are fighting AIDS that they live there. Okay, so that's why they're involved. So add that question. So their thing is lets local governments control rent. Okay, it lets local governments decide how and when to control rent instead of doing it at the state level, and that corporate landlords are calling the shots and profit from the lack of housing supply. Okay, opposition. Shocking. The California Apartment Association is one of them. So a variety of business and real estate. They've raised $78 million. And the big hitters there, California Association of Realtors is $22 million. The California Apartment Association is $25 million. National Association of Realtors is $5 million. So some big money here on the opposition. And what they're saying is it would increase housing costs, it would block new affordable housing from being built because the investment might not pay off for itself, and that would worsen the housing crisis. It would eliminate homeowner and renter protections that already exist because now all of a sudden those go away, and would reduce home values. Okay. So, yes means repeal the law that limits the kind of rent control cities and counties can put in. That's what you're voting on. So some of the advertising around this says that if you vote yes, you're voting for rent control. You're voting for the potential of rent control. Okay, it's not a direct connect there. Vote no says let's just keep it the way it is. Okay. And now another one that has these same cast of characters in it.
Now, you would not think that Proposition 34 has anything to do with Proposition 33, would you? Just look at this. It restricts spending of prescription drug revenues by certain healthcare providers. It's a citizens initiative, which means that some entity in California took it upon itself to gather enough signatures to qualify this for your ballot. Somebody cares a lot about this. We're going to find out who it is. It requires a simple majority to pass. And before we go any farther, I just want to go back to the certain healthcare providers. So this piece of legislation, it is very specific about the certain healthcare providers. There are several criteria. They're very specific, as I said. The criteria of these certain healthcare providers. They must participate in a federal discount drug program. They have to have a 10-year period where it spent more than $100 million in non-patient care. And it must own and operate multifamily housing units with at least 500 severe violations. Now you've just learned, you've gotten some tips from Sheila about who could this be, what entity could we be talking about here. Well, let's go forward and take a look. So if this passes, it would require these certain healthcare entities to spend at least 98% of their revenues from federal discount programs on direct patient care. So right now, entities can get a discount program of drugs through the federal government, and then they can turn around and sell those drugs to patients through insurance, and they can keep the balance. So it's an opportunity to get discount drugs at a lower cost, and then resell them and take the profits from that. And there's nothing illegal about that, and there's nothing on the books right now that requires how that entity must spend that money. But this particular proposition says, yes, we're going to tell you how you can spend that money now, and you must spend that money on patient care, not in other things. If you do, it says you can be penalized for noncompliance, and you lose status in California. So there's a fiscal bottom line. The suggestion is it could increase state costs. It's likely to run in the millions to enforce these new rules on these, quote, certain healthcare entities. So there is literally only one healthcare entity that we can find that this affects, and it is the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. It is the organization that funded the previous measure to the tune of $15 million. That organization has spent over $100 million in the last few years to repeal Costa-Hawkins. As Sheila said, Costa-Hawkins has been on your ballot. You probably remember having seen it in the last few election cycles. That's why it's been on your ballot. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation has spent hundreds of millions of dollars to repeal Costa-Hawkins. And if you look at the supporters of this, look how much money they've spent. Almost $27 million to enforce this proposition. This proposition that literally only affects the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. So you can see the California Apartment Association is behind this. Some other associations that are affiliated with it. But this has been called a revenge proposition. This proposition, it has been argued, exists strictly to punish the AIDS Healthcare Foundation for their years and years of spending their money, instead of on patient care, on politics. So that's why this proposition's here, and this is who put it there, and the money that's surrounding these two propositions is ridiculous. This is what the supporters say. I mean, despite it being a revenge proposition or whatever it's been characterized, it actually does drastically cut the cost of prescription drugs. It also requires these individuals to use their money on patient care versus on trying to create political advantages for themselves. So it actually does direct funds to what seems to be an obvious solution to this problem. But the opposition, look who's at the top of this opposition page, and look how much money has been spent to oppose this. These are two behemoths in California just going at each other, and we all as voters get to watch this play out. It's crazy, but the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is the major opponent of this proposition, and they're saying that it only exists because to weaponize this process and to turn it against the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. So again, this is politics in California. We've talked about a lot of opportunities where we can do good and vote for expenditures and changing the Constitution and organizing our values, etc. This is none of that. It's a very interesting use of citizens' initiatives and California's electoral system and politics to create situations that provide benefits for the individuals who bring them to you. So just spend some time thinking about that because it's really interesting. So again, to wrap this up, if you vote yes on 34, you are saying that you want certain healthcare entities, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, to start to use the revenue that they take from their discounted drugs on patient care. If you vote no, then you're saying they can, they don't have to manage that money in any specific way. So that's 34.
Okay, another one that at least is showing up on some of my mail and social media. Prop 35 provides permanent funding for Medi-Cal health services. So the question is, should California make permanent an existing tax on managed health managed healthcare plans to provide ongoing funding for Medi-Cal and other healthcare services. That's what we're voting on. So California currently imposes taxes on healthcare plans, but it's not permanent. So it has to get renewed. It was last approved by the legislature in 2023. It expires in 2026 unless it's approved again. Okay? So what this is doing is saying, instead of going through that repetitive approval process, let's just make it permanent. Okay? It's matched with federal funds. So between this tax that's on managed healthcare and the federal, it basically supports healthcare services for low-income families, seniors, disabled people through Medi-Cal. Okay. There's about 14 million Californians that actually benefit from Medi-Cal programs. So the big part of this is that it makes permanent that tax. It requires that the revenues from this only be used for specific Medi-Cal programs, and it prohibits the revenues from being used to replace existing funding. So if these revenues go up, that just means there's an increase in the Medi-Cal funding. Okay? And it does have caps under the administrative side so that you just can't hire more administrators. It's actually meant to be direct patient care. Okay. So fiscal bottom line, beginning in 2027, when this would go in, there'd be a short-term costs that would go up to increase the funding for healthcare programs. That would then get replaced by that tax. There's potentially long-term effects, but unclear what those are. So the support, quite a few of the healthcare professional societies. So Academy of Pediatrics, the Dental Association, all of that. They've raised $45 million. Out of that, $15 million of it is the California Association of Hospitals and Health Systems. Global Medical Response is $13 million. That's the ambulance company. And the California Medical Association is 10. So again, some healthcare groups, they say it protects and expands access, dedicated on ongoing funding so that you're not always saying, is it going to happen or not? Improves access to healthcare and strong accountability. There are no opposition to this on the ballot. Nobody has submitted arguments. They're not saying anything. Okay, so Prop 34, voting yes, says let's make the existing tax permanent. No says nope, we're not going to make it permanent, and we'll have to just re-up it. 35, excuse me, Prop 35. Okay. So, and then the last state proposition, Lori will go through.
Right, so this is the last state proposition. After this, Sheila's going to take us through some local ones. Well, Sheila and I both will, but we're going to wrap up here with the state, and it's essentially asking us to allow felony charges and increase the sentence for certain drug and theft crimes. It's a citizens' initiative. It requires a simple majority, and it's essentially a response to Prop 47, you all may remember, from about a decade ago. So in 2014, we voters decided that we were going to kind of change the sentencing structure here in California. We changed some of the laws that had previously been considered felonies. We reduced them to misdemeanors. Most notably is the one of shoplifting becoming a misdemeanor up into $950. So we lessened the punishment for certain crimes in California, and part of that was a reaction to the fact that our prisons were overcrowded. I don't know if you all remember, but we had gotten a mandate from the federal government saying that we had to reduce our prison population, and so these are some of the ways that voters decided to do that. Prop 47 in 2014 did that. So, however, in recent years, the prevalence of smash and grab type theft, shoplifting, and that type of thing has increased to the point where it looks like perhaps the pendulum needs to swing in another way. And so this was brought to your ballot in kind of a response to Prop 47 from 2014. And so it just changes some of those misdemeanors back into felonies. It lengthens some felony sentences, and it requires some felonies to be served in prison. It also creates a new type of felony it's a mandated treatment felony. So people who need drug rehab, instead of going to prison, it would enable them to seek drug treatment instead. The fiscal bottom line, obviously, if some of these what are currently misdemeanors turn out to become felonies, it will increase the prison population, and criminal justice costs will increase as well. It can be up into the millions, depending on how it rolls out. There are some supporters who have raised around $7 million to help see this proposition passed. You can see it's a pretty big list here. Of course, the supporters say that tougher laws are needed to guard against these smash and grab and shoplifting and other types of crimes and thefts, and that it will allow prosecutors to combine the value of items. So it allows, if you've done 2 or 3 smash and grabs, if the content or the total value exceeds $950, it can all be added, and you can face felony charges under those circumstances. And the supporters say it will reduce crime because, of course, being charged with a felony is much more grievous than being charged with just a misdemeanor. There is opposition to this, of course. They've spent almost $2 million to oppose this piece of legislation. And they say that the law already requires felonies for smash and grabs and drug trafficking and other things that would also be included in here. And it will make California less safe by reducing funding for crime prevention. So their argument is that we're diverting resources to send people to prison versus treatment and rehabilitation and crime prevention. So to wrap this one up, the last state prop, if you vote yes, it means that you agree that people convicted of certain drugs or theft crimes could receive punishment such as longer prison sentences, and including drug possession, etc. And if you vote no, then it means that the law will stay the same. Okay, Sheila.
Okay, deep breath. We're done with the state. And we put together this slide because it seems that this is the year that we've got a lot of sales tax on the ballot. So before we get into the specific measures, this is our current sales tax breakdown. So with the sales tax that you pay, 6.25% goes to the state. Currently, 0.5% goes to San Diego County. And then depending on what city you're in, there's additional taxes. So for most of us here, we live in San Diego, which is the top one. Currently it's 1%. When you total all that together, right now we're paying 7.75% sales tax. Okay? Key things say the state determines what is taxed, not localities. There's like a 70-page document on this, but the big thing is some items not taxed include food, prescription meds, utilities, diapers, menstrual products. Key thing with food, if it's prepared, it's taxed. If it's not prepared, so if you buy the chicken and you cook it yourself, it's not taxed. If you buy the rotisserie chicken, it's taxed. Okay? So, we're going to talk about next Measure G. So, Measure G is for the county, and it should, the County of San Diego, so it's countywide, approve a 0.5 cent sales tax within the county to fund transportation priorities. It is a citizens initiative. Do I have this detail in here? I've got it on the next. This is the second time that they talked about getting this on. In 2023, it did not get enough signatures to get on the ballot. So SANDAG, which is the San Diego Association of Governments, chose not to put it on the ballot. If they put it on the ballot, it needs 2/3 vote to pass. If it's a citizens initiative, it just needs a simple majority. Okay, so this year they got enough signatures to get it on the ballot. So the money that they would raise would fund this pie circle. So it'd be transit, roads and highway projects, transit operations. It would fund fixing the railroad tracks and putting them underground in Del Mar. It would fund some mass transit, the big things. And it is a specific tax, meaning that this will go to these. It's not to go into a general fund. It would raise taxes by 0.5%. So that piece that's the county would go from 0.5% to 1% total in the entire county-wide, and they say it would raise $350 million annually. Okay, the supporters, you'll notice on these slides, once we get into the local measures, that you're not going to see the funding because it's impossible, not impossible. It's a lot of work to find it from reliable sources. So you decided not to put the work in there. So signers on this are a lot of environmental groups throughout there and a lot of building groups. Supporters say it'll raise between this and the matching fund that we get from the state and federal, that will end up having close to $1 billion a year for transit projects, transportation, both repairing and upgrading roads, bridges, our transit lines, our rail lines, improve the quality of life, because part of in this is storm drainage systems, and that because it's a San Diego county tax, it's guaranteed to stay in the county versus something that's at the state level, and it has some audit provisions in it. Opposition, county supervisors, Reform California, which is Carl DeMaio's association, San Diego Taxpayers Association. What they're saying is this is earmarking of a sales tax, and therefore it's ballot box budgeting, and it's a regressive tax. So it's not a property tax to people on property. Everybody gets it, and it hits lower income people more. It makes our cost of living even worse. I won't fix the roads. I'm not sure where that's in there, but that's what they're saying. They also feel that a lot of the money is going to mass transit, which doesn't help people in East County and North County. Another argument there. Wasteful spending with no oversight. So on this one, a yes means increase our sales taxes by 0.5 cent and that the money will be used for transportation. A no says just keep it the way it is. And again, either find the money someplace else or don't do the work. Okay. Lori's going to take the next two, and because I'm kind of the tax bond person, I'll do the last one.
So we're going to talk now about the City of San Diego measures. So Sheila just took you through a county measure. We have 3 city measures as well, C, D, and D. And we'll talk about C to start. This one is about an election and the way elections are run, and kind of organizing our elections in particular instances. So this one is going to ask us should the City of San Diego charter be amended to eliminate primary elections for members of the Board of Education for the San Diego Unified School District if only 2 or fewer people are running. So as you all know, right now in our primaries, the top 2 vote getters automatically go to our general. So in this particular question, we're asking if the same situation which occurs in the Unified School District, if they can just eliminate that primary if only 2 or fewer people are running. So that's essentially the question. So the 2 candidates that qualify to run for a particular school board seat and receive the most votes in the primary automatically advance to the general, just like it does in our elections. That's how the school boards are run. And so the contention is that when there are 2 or fewer candidates, they're all going to go anyway. So why continue to host a primary under these circumstances? And that's what this measure is all about, is changing that law or rule. So the fiscal bottom line is, if we allow the San Diego Unified School District to operate just like the rest of our municipality does, it would save about $130,000 per seat. And since San Diego Unified School District pays the registrar of voters for election costs, there are no fiscal impacts to the city of San Diego. So it would save some money. It would eliminate some extra work by these candidates. So people in support of it are the Education Association, San Diego Taxpayers Advocate, several others, as you can see here, council members, etc. And what they say is that it aligns the SDSU, San Diego Unified School District, election rules with the San Diego County's election rules, etc. And it just makes everything operate seamlessly and aligned together. And it saves the school district money, and it limits the impact of social interests. So those are their three comments around support. There is opposition to this, and here are the individuals who oppose it. And their comments are these three talking points. So corporations and special interests, they say, will benefit from this change. They say by eliminating the primary, it offers voters fewer choices. And they also say that the money saved by this elimination will not be used for students. So these are some of their comments around opposition. And so to wrap this up, if you vote yes, it means that you would like the city charter to be amended to change the election of the members of the Board of Education such that if two or fewer candidates qualify to run, the voters will vote to the municipal instead of making them go through the primary. And if you vote no, it means essentially things will stay the same in the charter. Yes, if it's two or fewer candidates in the primary would be eliminated if this passes. They wouldn't have to run in the primary. They would just automatically be sent to the general, which is how they would automatically be sent to the general anyway, because the top two vote getters automatically are sent. Okay, so here's Measure D. This one is concerning the Ethics Commission. And the question is, shall the independence of the Ethics Commissions be ensured by requiring that only voters can eliminate it and by establishing certain other commission powers and responsibilities? And it requires a simple majority to pass, and you'll see that the city attorney and council recommended this. So currently the Ethics Commission is overseen by the entity that it's supposed to oversee. And it's a strange circumstance, but it's supposed to be a watchdog on the city council, or it's supposed to oversee the operations of the city council, their ethics. But ironically, the city council gets to determine who sits on the ethics commission. It gets to choose the executive director, etc. So all this does, it removes that relationship, and it makes the Ethics Commission independent of the entities that it's supposed to be overseeing. So it would enable the commission to appoint its own executive director without city council approval. It would enable that executive director to control the rules and policies of the Ethics Commission, again, without city council approval. It would enable the commission to retain the ability to get its own legal counsel versus having to hire the city attorney. You can see it just separates the city council and the city entities from the Ethics Commission so that the Ethics Commission has some more independence. The fiscal bottom line is the assumption that because the Ethics Commission would have more latitude and independence, and it might be in a position or need to hire its own attorney, it might have expenditures associated with that. But it's essentially what you see there. The people in support and the entities in support, the League of Women Voters of San Diego is a signer on this initiative, as well as I said, Mara Elliott. She is the city attorney. She brought it forward along with Joe LaCava, who's a city council member. And so these entities and people support and have signed official arguments in support of this. And the supporters say that it will improve the commission's ability to hold accountable those it regulates and protect the interest of the city and its residents. It will ensure that the commission is independent from those it regulates, and it will help maintain the public's confidence and trust in the Ethics Commission's work. There is no opposition to this. There's no stated public formal opposition to this measure, and as such, there are no arguments. So this is an easy one to discuss. And then Sheila's gonna Oh, this is it. Okay, final wrap up. Measure D, if you vote yes, do separate and make it more independent and autonomous. Vote no means that it stays the same. Okay, measure E. Sheila.
Okay, our last one, Measure E. Question here is, should the city impose a new 1% sales tax in order to generate additional revenue for the general fund, which can be used for infrastructure projects, core services, and general city needs? So, current situation, we currently have 1% of it, of our total 7.75 sales tax. 1% goes to the city. This is one of the lowest city rates in the state of California. Our budget has a $200 million structural deficit. So revenues coming in, what they're spending, they've got a loss of $200 million every year. So that's not sustainable. So this would raise the sales tax to 8.75%. And if adopted, they would start collecting April 1st, 2025. Okay. Reason for that date is so that all the business software would get updated to put this in. When you read some of it, they're saying target would be critical infrastructure maintenance and construction needs. It is a general tax, so it doesn't necessarily need to be used there. It goes into the general fund. So this is the same chart we had before. We said California State 6.25%, San Diego is 0.5%, City of San Diego today is 1%. We're paying 7.75% today. If Measure G passes, that goes to 1. If Measure E passes, it goes to 2%. Therefore, our total sales tax that we could be paying is 9.25%. Okay. So, if it passes, the city would receive additional revenue of $360 million to $400 million. That increase could be used for infrastructure projects. It would reduce the $200 million structural budget deficit. Supporters, firefighters, the police officers, one of our city council members, our mayor. Supporters say it improves emergency response times, supports better neighborhood infrastructure. Every penny generated stays exclusively in San Diego. Okay, so the city doesn't have a lot of ways to raise funds, and this is one of the ways that they can do that. Opposition, San Diego Taxpayers Association, and then a variety of individuals. And their argument is a couple things. There's no sunset clause for this additional tax. Some other cities do have sunset clauses, meaning we're going to increase it, the sales tax for 10 years, 20 years, whatever. This one is until it gets changed by the voters. That San Diego residents are already dealing with high tax rates, and that they feel the money's going to be going to the wrong places, and it goes into the general fund, so it could be spent on anything. So, a yes vote means yes, increase the sales tax in the city of San Diego 1% on taxable items. A no vote means no, do not increase it, and figure out either do without or how you're going to reprioritize. So, and last but not least, if you want to support our work, there's a QR code for that. We have had over on the tables over there our Vote 411. There's a QR code on that. That will take you to a site where you can put in your address, and what will come up is the things that are on your ballot. Okay? It'll be some of the information you've seen here on the propositions, but it will also be information on the candidates that the candidates have provided to us. Okay? And then on this card, which is over there, if you haven't picked it up, this is the QR code that takes you to our election site. And on that site, we have some brief overview documents. And for people who really want to deep dive, there is some very in-depth. And then this video will be posted there tomorrow. And all the slides are posted on that website. Okay?